Hello, everybody. We're here for the mobile event for today. Thanks everybody in the room and everybody the 70-ish people that were waiting on the stream. It was them that were late, of course. Everything was ready. Especially some of the cross-platform guys were late. It's the usual. But apart from the jokes, okay, let's start. Today you came to, or at least you sit down on your couch to see mobile stuff. So is it actually interesting to have a mobile app while everybody is speaking about AI everything? Are mobile apps still something useful or things of the past? So let's look at 2024, and hopefully we'll see some beautiful slides here from Danielle on kind of data on 2024. What does that mean? So is it relevant to have an app in 2024? So some data says that we went and see what's the average daily hours spent on mobile per users on the UK, and these are all data available on studies, and that says that users spend 3 hours and 48 minutes per day on mobile apps. This is kind of just a number, so it doesn't mean much because you can just do something. You can just be on bed for a lot of hours and it doesn't bring revenue, so doesn't mean anything. But an interesting thing starts to be when 80% of users, UK users, only use their phone to browse the web. Okay, 80%. It's still not kind of a lot of people, but 80% only using the web through a mobile phone. An interesting thing. Okay, so moving forward, we have looking at e-commerce. We have 662 million app shopping hours. That's 41 million adults over 18 years, and 87% of them are through a smartphone, and they spend like 5 minutes on average shop. So that's a lot of money. So I guess the question is, should at least e-commerce business have a mobile app? Well, 350% increased conversion on mobile versus mobile web says yes. Okay, so we're talking about 350% of users that increase their purchases through mobile. And why is that? Why do we prefer mobile? So a little study that we can share afterwards, 80% of the users, 80% of the web versus mobile apps, web apps are slower, 80% slower. That's a lot. And we have also a common thing, which is push notifications. Push notifications, if you receive an email or a push, that's a very different thing. And there's a very, very large number of users that click on push notifications, while a very low and keeps getting lower number of users clicks on an email to open that. So if you want to brand or push your brand somewhere, go through push if you can get them with an app. It's an interesting number because it's quite high in the 3 digits. How much do you think it is? It's 976% more likely for you to open a push notification than an email. These are all studies on the UK and US market, and 75% of US adults also only prefer to shop on app versus website. Okay, so question there, right? So is it useful to have a mobile app in 2025? I guess the question might be, is it useful to have a website in 2025 with this data? Because apps are clearly outperforming web by a large margin. Okay, we're looking just at e-commerce, but okay, and also a bit biased because although we're buying more on mobile, we still have a lot of percentage through web. Okay, so a bit of bias, but still, that's it. So I guess apps are a battling ground to secure the share of wallets. Apps reduce the cost of marketing. apps bridge in-store and digital experiences, and speed is crucial. So I think apps are essential. So I guess the short answer is yes, we should have apps in 2025, hopefully, because I still want to have a job. Probably these guys also. And also speaking for Gen Z, in Gen Z slang, and I need to read this because I'm not Gen Z pro. You're the Lulu if you don't notice the facts. Apps are still fired, but you do need to slay them, whatever that means. Okay. So, and I'll shut up now, and I'll move to the people that are really interesting to speak now. And let's start with iOS. You'll see a little QR code and website here that you can read and kind of send questions. So it's tinyurl.com/askmobile. Send us our questions, and in a few minutes I'll look at them and ask some of them. Okay, but let's start with iOS, right? So it's 2008, and App Store was just launched, right? Everybody wants to jump in. Steve Jobs is the best man in the world. Like for the first time, iOS developers are rock stars. Okay, they were nerds, now they're rock stars. The world is a bit strange, but it's still that. Everyone wanted to jump on that bandwagon, right? Now it's 2024, so you have like Kotlin Multiplatform, Flutter, Maui, React Native. Why do we still need iOS developers? I guess just start with a little intro on you and then the question.
Okay, thank you. So my name is André Pacheco Neves. So I've been an iOS developer for 10 plus years now. Thank you for the invite, and thank you for my co-hosts for being here. And yeah, well, so answering your question, I think iOS is still relevant because and will keep being relevant even though there are other options. Mostly because so the iOS native implementation or native ecosystem always is ahead, right? Is where the innovation happens first, and then all the other options arrive a bit later. So they are closing the gap sometimes, but sometimes the gap still exists and it's not trivial to overcome. So as everything, there are trade-offs, obviously. So having a native team, for instance, has a different cost and different mechanics than having a cross-platform team. So it's always a tough decision to make, and it depends a lot on the product, on the budget, time frames, etc. But I still think there's room for native iOS development, as if you want the best, and here I am being a bit biased, if you want the best experience with the latest available APIs and capabilities of the devices, native is typically has a bit of an edge, at least during a bit of time. Then the gap gets closed eventually, but if you want to be on the edge, taking the advantage of the latest tools, latest language features in case of iOS Swift, then native has a bit of an edge.
Thanks, Pacheco. Um, Android has been called the poor cousin of iOS from the start. Okay, and there might be some reasons to that. There might not be, but more interesting than that, I guess. Android now is developed in Kotlin mainly, and you now have your friend next to you with Kotlin Multiplatform. So you have Kotlin Multiplatform, which is close to Kotlin. You have Compose from Jetpack and Compose Multiplatform. So why exactly are we just developing for Android and not going multi-platform from the start? Is there any advantage to that?
Well, first of all,
And
I'd like
thank you, Manuel. Let me introduce yourself. Sorry, please.
so first of all, I'd like to congratulate Mindera for the initiative and also thank you for inviting me. Uh, my name is Manuel. I'm director of engineering from the mobile department at Sword. Regarding your provocative question, no, I don't think that Android is, what was the word that you mentioned?
The poor cousin.
The poor cousin. I think that we all, not only Android, but all the other, we had also the Windows platform, which I don't recall the name now, Windows Phone. But I think that diversity is very important, and having multiple options is very important, not only for us to experience different things and different point of views, but also to push each other even further. Regarding Kotlin Multiplatform, well, as Andrea mentioned, it always depends. It will depend on the product itself. What are you developing? The size of the team, the experience of the team. There's a lot to take into account when you start developing your product or your app. But it's great to have even more options. I don't know if the future is Kotlin multi-platform. I don't know if the future is Flutter. It's Maui. I think it's Maui. Maui, or .NET Maui. Or ReactNative.
It's kind of curious when we don't even know the right name of it. So just
because
throwing a provocation. But
I was going to say that we know that it's not Xamarin.
yeah, not anymore. Are you sure about that? Okay, so but yeah, that's it. So it's always great to have different options. I think we need to understand exactly what is the goal of what we are starting to develop, and also the depth of what we already have. And yeah, we need to and should analyze all the options that are in the market, what might be the pros and the cons, and then take that into our decision.
interesting. You're being everyone is being still very amicable with each other. So not me. So let's start with the elephant in the room, right? React Native on the React Native room. So is React Native only trendy because you actually have React developers and you think, okay, I'm the boss. I have some React people doing websites, web apps, whatever. That's all the same. Let's put the guys doing that. And that's how you end up with React Native. That's it. And thanks for being here. Short intro.
Thank you. So my name is Joel. Thank you for the invite. Answering again that provocative question. I believe not, of course, not every scenario. Maybe it can happen. Not saying it doesn't, because we live in a non-perfect world. But I believe the main edge that React Native has over every other technology is exactly that you can easily convert people from other technologies to come to mobile and do mobile apps. Of course, sometimes it happens, what you said, that people are just moved because they are web developers. But nonetheless, they are still valid developers, and
Is that what we call fake it before you make it?
almost. Sometimes it can be, but I believe this so React Native it mainly feeds with the big community has behind it. It's really big community, open source. We have, so even React Native also uses React. So of course we leverage it to do our development, right? That's why we attract people. Of course, it's really different in some cases, but I would say like 90% of the scenarios you can get with so hacking together an app, just being a React developer, it's possible. If it will be scalable, most likely not. But yeah, I believe that that's not only why, because there's a lot of things that React Native offers, because we have basically all the native functionality available to our hands if we want to.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have our friend also from Flutter, and there's another elephant in the Flutter room, right? So Google has native Android, so they're friends. You see, they sit next to each other.
Right.
You have the native Android, and then Google starts supporting JetBrains and starts supporting Kotlin Multiplatform and Compose Multiplatform, right?
Yeah.
So, and you have Flutter, and suddenly there's a bit of layoffs with Flutter. They say that it's not layoffs; they're just moving offices. Um, so, should I really invest in Flutter to then go to the graveyard of Google in a few months?
Right. That's a very valid question. Hello, everyone. I'm Gil Durão. I've been working with Flutter since before the first major version of it. So before I answer that, I would just like to get back at 2 points in your intro about app purchases, web apps versus mobile apps. So I think I would just like to raise 2 points about that. One is that if you're a company and you deploy a mobile application through the App Store and it has in purchases, right? You have to purchase stuff for the app. You're gonna lose a cut of that to the big tech guys, right? And as a company, that can really matter a lot to you because it's, I think, for the Apple Store, it's about 30% that they take. And I think that for the Play Store, it's also 30% or somewhere near that. So if you're a small company or a medium sized company, you might be uh, curious about to know if a web app is a suitable alternative for you because then you don't have the big tech guys taking a cut of your profits. And as far as the performance goes between mobile apps and web apps, and this is a future trend, so nothing that can be visibly seen throughout the World Wide Web yet. But WebAssembly compiled web apps are just knocking at our doors. They're already in Flutter, for example, they're already available to some degree. So, watching out for WebAssembly ready web apps. I'm also curious to see how that will change the landscape that you previously mentioned. Now, to go to your question. Yes, it's true that Google has a habit of just killing every single project that they come across. It happened even with Stadia, if you guys remember that. It happened with Google Plus. So a lot of popular platforms products that were simply gutted by Google because they think it's the right decision to make for whatever reason. Um, and there has been talks about Flutter being dead for quite some time now. Yes, this year there were some news about some layoffs or some reorganizations within the Flutter team. Good news is the team is still there. um, I think the only notable change for me, at least, as a member of the Flutter community and as a Flutter developer, was Ian Hixie leaving, which was a big contributor to the framework, as well as Eric Seidel moving on to another company.
We'll speak later about the kind of forking away,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we'll get there.
So
Don't
yeah,
worry.
as always, if you're using a technology that you didn't create yourself, you have to be worried about it not existing sometime in the future. I mean, we can't predict when, but probably iOS will evolve into something else in the distant future. Android will also probably either cease to exist or evolve into something else, and Flutter eventually will also cease to exist and evolve to something else entirely. So, for now, my advice would be is you're safe using Flutter right now. Google uses it internally for a lot of their apps. There's a lot of big companies using Flutter, so I don't see it going anywhere soon.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so let's go to your friend that's trying to kill you.
Hello.
So hello, Carlos. Um, so there's also a little bit of an elephant there. So you have camp. So apart from every other person here, you're kind of two different people. So you're KMP on your legs and you're compose on your torso. So kind of does it actually make sense to just use one part of that? Because compose is still quite alpha for iOS. So is it actually a real option? And how much of an advantage is it is to use just KMP? So
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Carlos Mota. I've been developing for the bright side of apps Android for the past too long, 10 years, 13 years. And the past 5, I've been working with KMP and more recently with Compose Multiplatform. Before answering your question, I just want to say that we're going to fight against which should be the best tool. Of course, it depends on your project, your team, your requirements, and so on. The one thing that it's only valid with Kotlin Multiplatform, and you were mentioning that Android, iOS might evolve. We've seen that moving from Objective-C to Swift and Android from Java to Kotlin. The great thing about Kotlin Multiplatform is that you don't need to commit your entire project to Kotlin Multiplatform. So if you're going to use Flutter, your entire code base is going to be Flutter. So if Google decides to stop Flutter, bye-bye project. That happened with Xamarin in the past. Sorry. But if you're going to use Kotlin Multiplatform, that doesn't happen. We're friends with iOS that are going to have their code in Swift or Objective-C, and they can have a framework built for Kotlin Multiplatform or even Compose Multiplatform. So you can have everything in once. So if by some strange reason that I really doubt that it's going to happen one day, because JetBrains and Google are partners, they developed the IDE, the language. Now with Compose, they develop Compose. But if by some strange reason that happens, you still have the native part working. So, hey for us. Answering your question, so Kotlin Multiplatform appeared first, and the big goal of Kotlin Multiplatform is to share your business logic. Okay, so just a question: who here has a phone? It doesn't matter if it's Android or iOS. Okay,
He's trying to gain your hearts. Beware.
who has a computer? Okay, so everyone has these type of things. You also have a browser, and you also use the web to browse and all of those things. And this is the goal of Kotlin Multiplatform. We don't want to keep rewriting the same thing on all platforms. We don't want to write an access to a server in Android, in iOS, in the web, in the desktop, in a Raspberry Pi. We want to share the same thing. Because if you're going to use Retrofit or Tor for Android, and then you're going to use Llama Fire or the cool library nowadays on iOS, or web, whatever. We don't want to keep rewriting the same thing, because if you're going to keep rewriting the same thing, you're going to have different implementations, and with Kotlin Multiplatform, you're going to have only one. Also, so this is the big goal of Kotlin Multiplatform, to share the business logic. 4 years ago, there was a really cool project that started a couple years before, which was called Compose. And JetBrains noticed that you can use Compose also multi-platform wise, and gives the chance to developers, if they want to save up time, to use Compose multi-platform on their projects. So you can use Kotlin multi-platform along with Android or iOS, or even with Flutter, or you can also use Compose multi-platform with Kotlin multi-platform, with iOS, with Android. It's up to the developer to use the tool that they prefer the best. Or in an ideal world, you can use Kotlin multi-platform and Compose multi-platform. Talking about iOS, so Compose multi-platform is nowadays on beta and not alpha, and rumors say that when Kotlin Conf that's going to be on May, it's perhaps going to be stable back there. There are a lot of applications already made with Compose multi-platform, and I can say that for the desktop it works really, really well. For iOS, you've got small tweaks. But if we lay down all the other possibilities except from native, you're not going to have the issue that if you use fingers to scroll on your phone, the scroll will increase on iOS, like we have on Flutter.
That's been fixed.
I've heard that 5 times and it still happens. If you have two
It's been
apps,
fixed.
you can still see the differences between native and
Now I'm
and-
liking. I'm seeing some friction finally.
or if you try to use something React Native, you're going to see a slower performance, or if you're going to see something that you need to port to Maui, it's going to happen somewhere in the future. So if you want to use something that's possible to be shared across platforms, I would go with Compose. Of course, it's still on beta, so perhaps you're going to still use something native, but the door is open and the future is bright.
Well, I have to say, our last speaker, I have to admire the man, because he comes and speaks about a platform that half of the people in the room don't even know how to spell, or some of them still think it's Xamarin. So Microsoft ended the support for Xamarin in May 2024. Okay, so quite recently. What would really drive me to jump into a new Xamarin after being cut off by Microsoft just so recently?
So,
A little
thank you.
bit of intro also.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. My name is Carlos Henrique. I am a mobile developer for 10 years. And about the question, Maui is not end of Xamarin, it's evolution. Okay, the Microsoft team has rewrite the framework, okay, from zero, and because Xamarin has had problems, and the Microsoft decides rewrite to resolve this problem and improve the developer life to better. Okay, so Maui bringing many features from Xamarin, okay, but improve the performance, improve the ways to connect with native platforms, okay. Different from other platforms like Flutter or ReactNative, Xamarin connect directly with the native API from the iOS and Android, okay. And different from Xamarin, Maui brings to the desktop and web possibility with Blazor, for example, okay, and bring to the improvements from the new .NET framework, because the oldest is .NET framework, and now it's just .NET, okay, and now it's .NET 9. So even the Xamarin applications need to be migrated to keep the main code, and I think the developers could do the migration to enjoy the new features in new performance.
Thank you. So we had our first round, no knockouts yet. Okay, so let's probably go to round two. So we started with Apple and back at that. So we started with apps in a very, very closed by default scenario. Now, in a new world, Apple is tightening the grip a little. So you have now all of them being able to produce iOS apps. More than that, if you have seen Discord on and you have an iPhone, did you notice something recently? Is actually migrated to React Native. Well, some say that the performance is either the same or it even doesn't seem that it's different at all. So were we wrong the entire time?
No. So yeah, I think that this comes in waves, right? So it seems that we are in a new wave that some companies are trying React Native again, and they are claiming these big benefits. Obviously, they won't admit defeat, right? This they want to otherwise they wouldn't go public with it, I think. So they always claim, okay, this has been the same or better. What I've been what I've been seeing, or at least my feeling, is that my perception is that, okay, they try to use React Native, but they don't just migrate to React Native. They take the chance and also optimize and rewrite the code. So if you rewrite the code, you will learn from past mistakes, or at least you should. And so it's likely that you will end up with better performance or slight optimizations here and there that will then, okay, it's not the fault of the, or not, it's not the tech that's the full responsible for the improvement, but also the other engineering work that went into the migration. So I don't see it as a pure migration, but as a migration plus optimization plus refactor. So it's not, I don't think it's a fair comparison.
Interesting, interesting. Uh,
Can I just say something? Yeah, that's migration or rewrite. Now there is a what they call the mega thread of issues of React Native on the Discord issue tracker. And if you have an Android phone, just try to use Discord in landscape and try to send a message and see the marvelous world of React, where everything um, twinks. Uh, Everything, it's not on the right place. It looks like a Christmas tree. Perhaps that's appropriate to, yeah, it's appropriated for now. Just a small thing about that I think when Discord tried to do that, they tried to have the same code base so they could increment things when they were making the updates, because the desktop app were stable. I don't know if this number is true, but it was in one of the issues that was reported. They have 900 engineers working on the apps, and they tried to cut down, and they ended up hiring more people. That's on one of the issues. So yeah, it seems not to be the best decision on their side.
This is the first time that I see KMP going to the rescue of iOS, but
It's a new client.
new world.
He has to make friends.
Yeah. So staying on the native side, so Android is quite so they're a bit more close nowadays, but iOS started being very closed, Android very open. There's a bunch of reasons for that, but more interesting than that is discussing what is the future of Android. So we have Huawei, due to US sanctions, that just kind of said, yeah, going off and build their own OS. So people are now buying Huawei phones, and the common user doesn't know if that's Android or not. It seems Android, it's the same for them, and they just, how do I install my apps? This is a weird Huawei store. It's probably the rebrand of the Google store, whatever. At the same time, or a few years before, Samsung threatened the same with Tizen. Okay, is Android safe?
Was it really a threatening?
I don't know. They threatened. Then they got a bunch of money, and then they said, "Okay, just a joke. Bye bye."
It's a fair question. But I think we all know why Huawei took that step, and we also all know why they were able to do it. So, or to accomplish. Yeah, that's true. That's always. I don't know if it's a risk, because it's like when you had iOS in the beginning, and you didn't have Android, new platform arrived, so it will get a share of the market. So if new ones will come, it's new business, new things to work on. Maybe Kotlin Multiplatform. I know you're my right wing, so I need to. It's a new business possibility. So yeah, I don't see Samsung or a big player doing that shift, don't and taking the leap, because it's very costly, and in the beginning it will be really hard to get the proper share to be able to have a bright future. Of course, Huawei is a different player, and if it was in Europe, I'm sure it won't be here anymore. And as you mentioned, people don't know, so that's why they are still. It's not true there. That's why they are still buying Huawei.
Some people
here.
don't care, but
Yeah, just don't care. And Huawei has a lot of great stuff in hardware and software, but I don't see a risk here. I think that's market to everyone, and if a new player comes, then we just need to evaluate and maybe go with Flutter or Maui or something.
It's just a small thing that it's Samsung tried to do that with Bada, and it went really, really bad. They tried to have their operating system and they failed miserably. So
But that's good that people try.
agree.
Android tried as well. It could go wrong, but and we wouldn't be here if there's only iOS, or
We'd
even
be-
iOS. It could fail.
with Windows Phone still.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
someone
Can you
there would
imagine
be-
a word like that?
Someone would be very happy. You curiously, you mentioned you could go with Flutter. We could go with Maui. Didn't mention React Native. Not sure if that's.
It was a curveball.
I don't know.
For sure.
Okay, speaking now a bit unbiased. So we're speaking about Discord. There's a bunch of others saying that you could build with React Native with the exact same performance, UI UX experience as native. I call in that I doubt a little bit that, but actually React Native actually launched a new architecture. It says like some of the LinkedIn posts that I saw was like, this is the reaction to Flutter, which made me think. So they're admitting that Flutter was better, which was a bit strange. But they were saying that it massively improved performance and what you can do with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what can you
So
actually do with the new thing?
basically, what happened was there was a bridge to communicate with the with the native thread, right? Using React Native, you had to go through the bridge to reach the native code, get whatever you needed from native's land, and get back to React.
Bridge, just to explain, bridge between JavaScript and native,
Exactly.
right?
So it was a bridge between JavaScript and native. Um, as we all know, React Native was kind of hacked together in Meta for their own apps. So the initial architecture was not as good as it could be, and yeah, so it was basically a response to that. That new architecture is being worked on. It was worked on for like 6 years at least, since probably 2018, I believe. It's the no, it was even before that, and it's kind of available for a long time now. But it only now is the default by default enabled to the users. In the past, it was opt-in. Now opt-in. Now it's opt-out. Um, but what it allows us now to do with React Native is we can access memory from C++ land directly through JavaScript. We don't have to serialize the data anymore. So the communication between one and another is like direct. So that improves a lot. That's from that comes the big performance improvement. The UI UX part, then of course it will, I would say, never be the same, but it will be.
Ooh,
It is
harsh statement.
never is a strong word. Yeah, but it's good enough when well crafted for the end user to not notice a difference.
Okay, that might be enough. That's curious. So React Native said we're launching this new thing because Flutter launched something, which was kind of the, as I said, the weirdest statement that I've said. Like, yeah, we're launching this new car because our last car wasn't great, so we're launching this new one. Not giving a lot of confidence. At the same time, I went into look into Flutter, and I'll throw a few questions. Okay,
Sure.
let's go with that. So first of all, how frequently do you need to write native code when you're writing Flutter? And the reason why I ask this is seemingly, and correct me if I'm wrong, one
Mhm.
issue with Flutter is when you try to access Bluetooth or other APIs available on the native SDK, you need to use something called platform channels,
Mm.
and that you need to send data across a pipeline that Flutter creates, and now you're writing in Swift and Kotlin, and then you need to send only primitive types like hello JSON, just sending massive strings that needs to be parsed.
Mhm.
Hello performance issues because you're just parsing stuff back and forth. Hello 1999. Am I wrong?
Uh, you're partially correct.
Good.
The scenario is a bit more complex than that. So yes, it's true. Initially, the way that Flutter approached communicating with native channels or native APIs that your apps might need to is through platform channels. And communication by those platform channels is only available through primitive types. So you cannot send complex objects like you would want to. So yes, there's a bit of a headache in that, in which that if you do everything by yourself, you'll end up having to write the API. Let's say that I'm just doing a Flutter app for iOS and Android. I'll have to write the same thing on the Flutter side, on the Android side, and on the iOS side, so that it can communicate all very fluidly, right? That's not very great. It's very time consuming and it's annoying. The great people at Google and at the Flutter team had the idea to create a library called Pigeon, which basically generates all of that for you. So you declare your API in Dart. You mention which platforms that your plugin wants to target, and it will deal with the rest. And this even supports methods, function calls, whatever you need. That library will handle it for you. Of course, this is an external library, so you're adding another dependency to your project, which is something that you might not want to do. But it was their answer to this problem. Going to the first half of your question, should I create a Flutter app if I need to do a lot of native API calls? I would say it really it might depend on the amount of those calls. So if you're using API calls 24/7 in your application, and they are all crucial to the way that your product functions, then maybe Flutter wouldn't be the right solution. However, we've done a project in the past in my current company for a PDQ device, so processing payments through cards. We had to integrate a very old API to read card payments and to process those. And with Pigeon, you create a platform plugin library, which is a specific type of Dart library. You put it all in there nicely packaged per target platform, and it went very smoothly. And it's very easy to integrate. So integrating native platform calls in Flutter, it might seem daunting at first, but once you read through the documentation, you'll see that it's actually pretty straightforward.
I'm always afraid when people say when you read through documentation. That's
Flutter's documentation is good. Don't worry.
That frightens me a bit. So Carlos has been very helpful with the native guys. So let's throw a few arrows at him. So KMP has a few limitations. Okay, first,
Nah,
so let's start with the single file
doesn't.
framework. So basically, you need to everything that you need to export from KMP. Let's go for iOS, for example, needs to be a single flat framework. So you can't have multiple dependencies, just one single big thing, which kind of in the world that you strive for modularity, I'd say it's weird. Weird is like a nice word. Then you export that flight framework and the iOS guys start to connect with it, and wow, it's Objective C. Wow, it's 1999 again.
But wait, the App Store started in 2008, so
No, but I have a time travel machine, and basically what I'm asking is KMP kind of a Google production thing, which is always beta? So you're not in production yet. You're just kind of you're having developers testing it out, and you'll get there.
okay, so I'm going to start with the end of your questions. So one of the things that I really enjoyed with JetBrains is that they were really keen on saying that this is experimental. Okay, 6 years ago or 5 years ago when they initially started, they said this is experimental. You're going to have issues. Have patience. They always say that since day one, and people decide that they still wanted to try it out. A lot of people said, "Oh, but I have issues," and complain about this. But they were open on the beginning.
Just to say, that's what I tell teachers when they complain about my kids. Those are experimentals. They'll get there. It's kind of the same thing, right?
And they end up getting there, right?
Let's
We'll
see.
see. But the thing is this, and what JetBrains and now Google are trying to accomplish, it's something that none of the frameworks was able to do before. Okay, so they're trying to do something entirely different. First, Kotlin Multiplatform is not a framework; it's an SDK, and then it takes time to build a solution. So Swift took 6 to 8 years to develop, and it's just for iOS, and Kotlin Multiplatform aims to run on all the platforms, so it takes time.
It's not.
It's not 6 to 8.
No, Swift is not only for iOS, but
Yes. It's also possible to build Android apps with Swift. There's a fork now that no one uses.
for now.
For now, yeah.
There's actually a new framework which I couldn't get anyone yet, but I have someone in the room that will, well, not in the room, but in the live stream that will get there, which is Skip,
Yeah.
which is cross-platform built in Swift for mobile.
Yes.
Well, next year.
I've heard that like 2 years ago, but yeah. Um, but what was the initial question? Oh, okay. So JetBrains is always trying to say, okay, this is experimental, this is alpha, this is beta, and what's happening is developers just hear specific words and they don't read through the entire documentation. That's also amazing. And when you hear something like Kotlin Multiplatform, it's now stable on all the platforms. Compose, for instance, it's beta on iOS, it's stable on Android and on desktop, and it's experimental-ish or alpha, if you want to say, in WebAssembly. But people see, oh, this supports also web, let me try to use this, and a couple of use cases fail. So I believe we're going to reach stability in May this year. But there is still a couple of months until there. One thing that I'm entirely proud of JetBrains on this is that they usually set the deadlines right. So when they announced that Kotlin was going on 1.9, which was the 1.8, well, the stable version, they said that it was going to be fall last year, and it was fall last year. So we can trust on the deadlines that they say. And what was the first question?
So limitations. Let
None.
me let me.
Oh yeah,
get
the
my,
FAT framework. Yeah.
yes, in
Okay.
Objective C
And
and
Swift. Yeah.
Friends and
Yeah.
Let me quit. What's the current status of KMP for iOS? Is it beta?
It's Compose Multiplatform is beta, Kotlin Multiplatform is stable, and there is an issue that they've been working on to have full Swift instead of having Objective C.
Okay.
So when they started with Objective C because it was easier. Also because of the LLVM from Apple that they were using, it didn't add full instructions for Swift. That's why they started with Objective C. So this project started a few years ago when Swifter was also starting, and they need time to migrate everything also for Swift. It's expected that we're going to see these frameworks being created in Swift in the upcoming end of next year, perhaps 2026. And of course, this also brings a couple of limitations. So what's been happening is there are a couple of companies, namely TouchLab, that works closely with JetBrains, that released a couple of libraries that allow you to generate Swift code to be easier to consume. Of course, we can see this as a limitation, but also there are a lot of frameworks out there that are still on Objective C, and you have to use it on the iOS side if you use Swift. Talking about the FRAT frameworks, if anything, I've prepared really well for this question because I want to see FRAT frameworks are a problem, and okay, the problem when generating a framework, you need to generate a FAT framework, but the problem is when you want to generate umbrella frameworks. So if you want to have frameworks communicated one with the other, you need to create what we call an umbrella framework, where all the frameworks are inside, and this ends up using some space. It's true. Funny fact, if you try to implement the same thing on the cross-platform solutions, you still are going to have a bigger size than if you generate a framework that you can use on iOS side. This limitation is just for iOS. They're working on it. The current limitation, I think, it's because of Apple being so closed. But
they all say that.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, that's going to happen. In other words, I've been using that for the couple last years, and it's not because of that one extra megabyte that or extra 5 megabytes that is going to make some harm on your app, and you can take a lot of advantage of sharing your code. No, it's fine.
So I have a few questions already, but let's finish this round. Thank you for keep sending questions. I've been looking at them, and we'll get them after this round. Back to my favorite Maui. Okay, so there's a few. So there's a lot of questions that I had for this. One of the things is Maui has some nice things like let me go through that because Maui is one of the ones that I know the least. So improved hot reload support, capabilities to enable real-time UI changes, out-of-the-shelf DI. It's getting still is still getting mature. It generates a bigger app size, and you probably still need to write some native code. And you can correct me on that, like where exactly you need that. So kind of, do you know the game Sell Me This Pen? Well, you kind of try to convince me to use Maui. With all of this and getting late to the game, what exactly is my motivation to jump into Maui?
Okay, Maui is a SDK platform that you could develop apps like iOS or Android, because Maui connect directly with a native API. Okay, so you could write a native code directly in iOS or Android application. Okay, and there is needed to explain that there is a difference between the old Xamarin forms and the Maui implementation, because you could implement the UI, shared UI, okay, one code for two screens, iOS and Android, and Windows, macOS, okay? Or you could create your screens directly in iOS and Android using XML or in Android and storyboard in iOS. Storyboard, yes, storyboard in iOS. So it's a difference between ReactNative and Flutter, because you couldn't do this. Okay, maybe you could integrate some screens, native screens with Flutter, but you couldn't write directly. Okay, like Xamarin. Uh, because you must use or might use Maui. Maui provide good performance because connect directly with native APIs and help you to avoid these performance issues. Okay, and if you need some customizations, you could go to the native code, implement there, and connect with your shared UI. Okay, is the advantage in Maui. Is a big change for the cross-platform developers. Okay, so and I think Maui is good too for the teams that has a huge knowledge in .NET, even uh, in this version. Okay, because they implemented the new .NET 9. Okay, and you could use all features involved in Microsoft Azure DevOps to deliver your apps. Okay, you could use the good IDE like Visual Studio Code. Okay, I think it's a good tool to thing.
I'm
Okay,
not. I think iOS developers are now feeling a bit of the pain. Xcode.
but even in macOS, you could use VS Code, integrate with VS Code, Xcode. So is a good thing. So for developers from .NET, Maui is a good change, a good choice.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry. So you can have, imagine that you have an application with two screens. You can have a screen built native and the other one written in .NET, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yes, because with Maui you could write screens using XML. Is like a XML to write screens.
But
Okay.
it's limited with XML. You cannot write in Compose, for instance, or
No. The Maui use Compose. Use the Android directly.
so I was a bit hyped, and then sorry. Yeah.
But when you use Maui to write your UI, okay, you have access the native components provided by interface in XML. Okay, but at the end of code, the compiled code is not native. It's not like a bridge or a channel like Flutter or ReactNative. Okay, it's native code. So I think it's a big difference between the cross-platform options for Maui. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so let's address some of the questions. So the most voted question, and I'll open to whoever wants to speak about it. Says, since Cocoa Pods entered maintenance mode and it's the core of React Native and Flutter that I know of, so maybe that's wrong, maybe that's not. Is the future still bright for these technologies? One of you, one of you wants to address that.
Okay. I guess they should. So the ecosystem behind dependencies being used in React Native projects, I believe, will adapt soon. So I don't have much to answer that. I think it will, of course, not impact that much. For sure, there will be a solution for it, and there will be a new distribution method for dependencies, mainly for iOS, because Android it's fine.
They will fork Cocoa Pods.
Most likely, yes.
As you're seeing before, so they're one step behind.
There's another interesting question. So there's a bunch of interesting questions, but one that called so Pamela Cruz asked the question: in your opinion, what's the best technology for startups, and why is it Flutter? A bit opinionated.
Yes, slightly biased, but I'll give my best answer to that question. So, um, Flutter, first and foremost, is a UI toolkit or UI framework, or however you want to call it, and its reputation is based upon how fast you really can build a UI from day 0 to day 5, for example. You even have some companies like Flutterflow, which are trying to build a no-code system based on Flutter, which that company has been seeing some growth lately as well. But probably if you've tampered with Flutter a little bit, you've probably heard the saying, everything in Flutter is a widget. That's not 100% true, but for the most part, it is. So Flutter has a really low learning curve that something like Swift or Kotlin might not have. And Dart, as a programming language, is also very familiar to most developers because it's very similar to Java, a little less verbose. So that's a win. And of course, if you're a startup, you want to reach as many users as possible. With Flutter, you can target Android, iOS, web, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, uh, LG televisions next year if you want to go crazy too. There's even some people with some hacks that have been able to make Flutter work on a Nintendo Switch or an Xbox. So the fact that Flutter is so broad in its support allows a startup to increase its user base very quickly and very rapidly. And you can also save costs because instead of having, for example, an Android team, an iOS team, and a web team, and having those three teams be at the same pace, always be in feature parity with each other, you can just have a single team that is working from a single code base and deploying to all of these platforms that you want to get at.
Let me throw a question on this. So, and yeah, let me throw a question and I'll rotate the mic around. So, if you were to build a startup app and the kind of the key requirements are time to market, um, and well, we can talk about low cost because that's always a question on startups. Okay, so let's address those two. So your kind of, or your first priority is time to market, your second is cost reduction. So give me two answers. One is, what is the technology that you choose if you are willing to throw away the code after you launch the product, and the second one is if you're not willing to throw away the code and build upon it.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I don't entirely well, I don't entirely agree with Flutter being the right choice here. And of course, as you might
Surprise.
guess, I'm going to advocate Kotlin and Compose Multiplatform. The thing here is, I think when we're talking about developing an app fast, I think all of these solutions are valid depending on the team that you have on your startup. Honestly, I don't agree with the Dart being a small learning curve. I would say that because most people in university, if they have a share of or a model of programming or building apps, they usually do them with Kotlin or Swift. So I would say that the new people graduating from college already know these two technologies, and for that, Kotlin and Kotlin Multiplatform is the right choice. Um,
Where's the data for that, though?
Go to a university. I can say, I would say that from the universities that I've been that I've went to and I've spoken about Android over there, from what they told me is that typically they either develop on Kotlin or with Swift, and mainly it's Kotlin because a Mac is expensive.
Okay, let me throw a curveball at that, because the only stat that I've found out, and it's about cross-platform development, and it's from last year, says that Flutter has 42% of the market. I think it's 42, 46. React Native goes second with 35, and Kotlin Multiplatform is with 4%. I know it's last year, so there's a lot of that changed that.
Yeah.
So it reinforces a bit on that, not taking parties here, but kind of
No,
reinforces that view.
but those metrics are true. But Flutter exists for how long?
Since its birth, or since
Let's
production
say
use?
production use.
2020, 2021.
Kotlin was last year stable, so those metrics.
That's why I'm saying.
Yeah, but yeah,
it
but
is.
that makes
It's worth what I do.
yes, yeah, but it makes sense. The important thing here is to see the the metrics for this year compared with past year. And one thing that we've noticed on Kotlin Multiplatform, and once again, this is a metric like any other, it's the number of libraries being created and being published for Kotlin Multiplatform, and that number increased exponentially. I don't have here a graphic that I can show you, but I can show you afterwards. There was a chart announced on on Kotlin Conf, where basically you can just see the first 5 years of Kotlin Multiplatform, and you see a big exponential curve of libraries launched. Once again, I know that it's libraries and then don't represent the
And
number of
don't
apps.
run away from my question, which is
Yeah, sorry, yeah, true. So talking about the solution that I would choose, once again, it depends a lot on the team that you have. Assuming that it's a team from mobile and they don't be from web, I would go with Kotlin Multiplatform because I could share everything. And the most important thing is that
for both of them. So
I would go with Kotlin and Compose Multiplatform right now.
for
Yes.
for the one that you can throw away the code
No,
afterward.
I wouldn't throw nothing away.
Okay, you're a keeper. You're a keeper.
For instance, let's imagine that we did this really fast just to time the market, and we realized that we need to scale something. Perhaps I would throw away the iOS app, but I still have the Android app. No, wait, that came out wrong. Yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah, but this sounded really wrong. It's not what I'm saying. So I say
just so that the people at home can have a notion what the audience started to freak out and saying, if you're on the US market, they didn't say that, but they kind of call you a bit dumb, saying, why should you throw away the iOS app?
Wait. What?
The iOS
The iOS code. Yeah,
iOS code,
exactly.
the iOS code.
So the great thing about Kotlin Multiplatform is that you can. I'm not going to say hack because it's not hacking. It's like building a project in a short period of time. Once again, Compose Multiplatform for iOS is still better. So if you want to scale an app, perhaps it's not the best use case for you. It depends. A cool thing here is that you can reuse all the code from Android, which is already the most performant code possible because it's Kotlin, it's native, and you can still have that app. If the app needs to scale, perhaps we need to redesign the iOS app, or once again, the great advantage of Compose Multiplatform is that you can have a couple of screens built with Compose Multiplatform and the other screens built with Swift UI, or I don't know if still someone uses UI Kit. Yeah, but you can use Compose and Swift UI.
I'll get there. I'll get there.
Sorry.
So next one, are you?
Yeah,
You speak a lot. You speak a lot.
Multi-platform.
Well, first of all, I think we are mixing a lot of concepts. The first one is market share doesn't exactly matter when you're choosing the right technology to use when starting a startup.
Yes.
As he mentioned, it depends on the team that you already have. Usually, when it's a startup, your team is pretty small, but the knowledge that your team has is quite important on what you can and should opt in to use. Then it also important to evaluate what will your startup do,
Of course.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Obviously.
because if your startup is mainly, for instance, if you target US market, maybe
You'll
your
want to go
startup,
to iOS first. Yes.
yeah, and you
obviously.
only will go to
Yeah,
iOS,
of course.
because if you need to do a lot of native stuff, you won't take any
Yeah.
advantage of using a multi-platform solution. So yeah, I think we shouldn't run to the most used technology. We need to evaluate what exactly is the goal of the startup, what is the knowledge that your team has, and after that, take the decision.
Yes. Obviously, the first stage is to do
Yes, I
requirements
know we all
analysis.
want to sell our solution, but
Yeah, yeah.
on a startup is, I will say that most of the startups,
Can you
they,
throw a technology? Because you're saying let's evaluate with the team, but let's say you
well,
need to hire the entire team because
but you're a
levels the playing
startup.
field. That levels the
How
playing
much
field.
money do you have? The question is,
You
what
need to improve
technology should you
you need
use?
to improve to spend the least amount of money possible, so that can take into account the team that you need to hire also.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that I don't agree. It's that using a hybrid technology will save you money. That might not be true, right? If you just need to write native code, or 80% of your app is native code, you need to work with the camera, with Bluetooth, with whatever. It's not true that you will save money. Probably you will end up with getting throwing away what you have done because you're not able to accomplish what you need. But if I have to choose a technology, I will say that, and to save money, I will use native with Kotlin Multiplatform. We already use that at Sword, and it makes sense for some of our projects. Business logic you can share between using Kotlin Multiplatform and take advantage of that. So, but again, it will depend. If it's just building layouts, if it's a simple startup, or don't want to call it simple, but if it's an app that you don't have to manage a lot of native things, then probably Flutter, because it's the most adopted one. But if it's something more complex and you have to build and develop things in native wise, I
It all
would say,
depends on the requirements.
yeah, of course.
That's so polite.
Pacheco,
But I don't know. I don't know if complex things need native development. Okay. I think it is complex things could be a challenge in the team. Okay, but I working with Xamarin, Maui, and Flutter in both. I could provide complex things independent on the platform. Okay, I think it depends on the maturity of the team that will develop it, and know right what the requirements needs to implement. Okay, and direct well the team, the manager, the tech team to right solution. Okay, I think I don't know if you, when you have complex things to do, you go to native. No, I could, it's not good.
So I think we always, when you're starting, you should look at what is the state of the art, what are the things that you have, what are, and as you mentioned, the team that you have currently. So the only technology that you are sure it won't limit you is native, right? Because native is native. If you're developing to iOS, iOS will keep getting you support to whatever you need. If you're developing to Android, it's the same as well. And currently we have a lot of tools, not only this kind of different technology tools, but you have also AI. I don't know if you're aware of the latest features that Android Studio is launching. So you can work with them as well. So that's why I'm saying it depends. For me, the only technology that doesn't limit you in the future, for sure, will be native. Other than that, of course, they will end up giving support, hopefully, because I also don't want you guys, well, maybe if we are hiring, I want you guys to get fired, but I hope that all the technology, there's space for everyone and always evolving. Now from Xamarin to Maui, there's new features and new improvements, which is always good. But I say that native is the only one that will not abandon you because the big company just wanted to close the project.
Let's move a little more at pace. One thing that none of you have focused yet is, so you're focusing on the technology, which is why we're here. The reason why I mentioned cost is there's a cost in hiring, and none of you have focused on that. So if we're trying to found Maui developers, for example, which is a kind of a emerging new thing, is probably harder to find, probably implies more expensive, maybe not sure, haven't tried to hire anyone on that. But okay, let's focus more broadly, because when you're on a startup, tech is very important, but there's a whole lot of assumptions besides that.
Yeah, okay. So you're touching on a very important point, and I was going to mention that as adding to what has been said already. It always depends, right? So it depends on the team, depends on the product, depends on the company, the team you have, and obviously, if you are starting from scratch, the people you need to hire, right? So if you need to hire native developers, they are probably more expensive than, let's say, web, because there are more, less, I don't know, maybe are a bit cheaper, so to say, because there are more, there's more offer. For instance, Flutter developers are rarer, so might be also harder to get someone. Even if you decide that tech is what makes sense for you, then you have the hiring problem, that the talent pool might limit you. So to Vicente's point, that's also a very important variable. But if, let's say, the founding team has native knowledge, it's much easier for a native developer to build quickly an app in their native platform. And especially now with SwiftUI on iOS and Compose on Android, it's much easier to build something fast. Previously, it was a bit harder, I think, but obviously also the cross-platform tools also have an edge, because you can just write once and deploy multiple platforms. So it's a very complex trade-off and balance, and there's lots of different variables. So yeah, the big answer, I think, it depends. I cannot say I would pick one. There's lots of different variables, and yeah. So to me, if I wouldn't throw away the code, I also agree that probably native with KMP, it's maybe the best trade-off, because you have the shared business logic. I think for me, the challenge is where that business logic ends and where do you then use the native bits. But I think it fulfills the promise of sharing code and then having the best of both worlds. So that's my.
I'm starting. No, I'm starting to
But
think that
KMP is not perfect. Okay? don't get caught.
I'm starting to think that the way that you sit down is not a coincidence.
So the question is regarding the cost, right?
So yeah, what? So you talked a little bit. Flutter is the thing. If so, let's on you, since you already touched a little on this. Let's focus on that. How easy and how expensive is to find Dart developers? Basically, it's like a unicorn, right?
I wouldn't say it's like a unicorn. I think it's rather easy actually to find Flutter developers. Obviously, depending on their seniority levels. What I've experienced is that there are a lot of junior to intermediate devs, but senior devs are definitely harder to find. Um, hmm?
The learning curve.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, there are senior devs for sure. What I found as well with Flutter and potentially with other cross-platform approaches is that we can hire someone who's never touched iOS code before and is a pure Android developer, and they can learn Flutter pretty fast and get used to it. Same thing with hiring an iOS developer or even a web developer.
Although that has a cost, the cost
Yes,
of.
that has a cost, obviously. But so yeah, regarding that, that's all I have to say. Um,
So basically, for you, it's just hiring React people and they go.
So going back to your first question, this is the moment when you just bring web people to React Native. Basically, you hire like a really experienced dev in React Native that might also have some knowledge of whatever, because we always get in touch with the native layer anyways, right? So we either, if we want or not, we gain knowledge about the native platform. um, you just hire one really really experienced for for the React Native part, and then you convert to, I don't know what the size of the team, but imagine a team of five people maybe. One really experienced, like you get four people from the web. You just teach them the basics of how to do stuff in React Native and not on the web, because in terms of logic, since it's JavaScript, it's JavaScript. In terms of UI, there's a few quirks because we use the actual native components. We don't use P's and whatever from the web, right? We import views.
But
And
isn't that a pain when you then need to write anything native? So you have a bunch of people. So you have one person with a lot of experience on React Native, and then a bunch of people that just saw web browsers, and then suddenly you need to write something in Swift or Kotlin, and you're like, "What? What's this?"
but that's rarely the case, especially for I would say there's a lot of, the community is really big. There's a lot of libraries for whatever you need to do in an app already. You can just use a pre-built library. Only if you want really rare cases, you need to actually go to the native layer. For that, you have the experienced React Native developer, right?
Really highly paid for that pain.
For that, exactly, to hold on. And then you just teach the web people coming from web the main quirks, like you cannot render text in a view. You need to use a text component, right?
So just a quick question. You're mentioning time to market. That wouldn't increase the time to market because you need to code review the other people's code and at the same time teach them how to
The
do
thing
those
is,
things.
to grasp on the technology itself, to be able to use it effectively, is really quick. You don't have that many availability of native components. You have like view, scroll view, flat list for the recycle views, wherever. And then it's just a bunch of views, buttons. I know. I know.
like that you said it's a review, so you're the experienced one.
More or less. Hmm? I wish. So yeah, that's not that big of impact. It's just that small quirks, and of course, in web maybe people have the tendency to just type text anywhere. In native, that doesn't work like that. um, and as soon as you know that, you have all the tools you need to just do the UI. But as soon as if you know Flexbox, you know how to do UI with React Native, so it's fine. And then the logic is in JavaScript, so they already know that.
You always need that one seed element, right, to unblock.
I would say
The
it's
whole team.
important, because if you only bring web developers, they will not know exactly that those quirks, but they are easy to learn.
And our last, before we do a break for some food and drinks, and so that they can fight off all this tension that is building up. Would you use Maui in a startup, having as a key metric the lower cost and fast in time to market?
To hire people.
Well, you can. Let's think that you're in a startup and you need to hire everybody, and you're choosing the technology that you need to choose.
I think if a startup started with .NET technology, Microsoft technology, Maui could be a right choice, okay? Because you have all the environment from Microsoft and Maui complements. But if you have environment out of Microsoft, okay, maybe Maui could be hard to integrate it because your team don't know about .NET and this stuff. So like React Native, Maui provide you bring .NET developers to mobile environment with if even these developers are backend or front-end developers could bring them for Maui because the even the mobile stuffs the other is the same, okay, the structures, the architectures, okay, maybe you need to know a little about MVVM, about how you could implement the states, the why, about the ML, but the behind .NET is the same for backend, for other things, okay? So it is, I don't know about high people from .NET Maui because I know a lot of people develop that. So, and for me it's easy, but I don't know for the recruiters, okay? Uh,
It was hard to find you. Let's say that.
yes. Yeah, but I think today there aren't many people speak about Maui. Okay, there are some actors like James Montemagno. He was a big actor in Xamarin. Today is Gerald. I don't know the name. I don't name it right, but there are other people deal with this challenge to spread the information about Maui. Me try to do too, okay? But I think it's the big challenge. Let people know about Maui, right? For the interaction, even the .NET developers, okay? It's .NET developers. So for a startup, it's like that. I said, for a startup started with Microsoft environment, Maui is a well choice.
Okay, thank you. So we'll break now. We're 5 minutes late, but we'll break for 10 minutes, and we'll so people at home go and eat something. We'll do the same here. I'll try them not to kill each other, and we'll get back in 10 minutes. See you soon. And we're back. I managed to split them apart. They were battling, they were drinking some beer, eating some stuff, and we could be here for the entire afternoon. But we need to go back at some questions. We have, looking at the pool already, there was a question that we haven't addressed yet, which is we have touched cross platform, we have touched a bunch of things, we haven't touched no code. I haven't brought someone with no code. So a person is asking, no code is a thing on mobile. Okay. Yeah, you have out systems. So anybody has an opinion here that wants to share? Go.
So, no code is definitely an option that exists, and one which you can rely on if you just want a quick prototype to throw away right afterwards. And here's why. Carlos mentioned the probably the most famous company for no code or low code platforms, which is OutSystems, and they have done. There are a few products out there that are usable, that are made with OutSystems. Um, and speaking from the Flutter side, there's a company that I mentioned previously called Flutter Flow. They're trying to do basically what OutSystems is doing, but just using Flutter. Um, and the platform itself, it's very nice. You can drag and drop components as you wish. You can integrate API calls to so that you can connect a backend server to your app. The problem with the generated code that it creates is that it's unmaintainable, it's usually not scalable, and it's just a nightmare for any engineer to deal with. So, short answer is no code platforms. Yes, if you really just need to develop something or you have an idea that you want to see how it would look like in real life, but apart from that, I wouldn't recommend it.
Anybody else wants to step in on this?
I probably won't make any friends, but I think no code equals no good. Yeah, maybe I'm being too harsh, but from experience of using some apps that I think, or I'm pretty certain, have been built with no code tools, the experience is not very good, at least on iOS. So you can see it's a bit clunky. The animations are not there. The navigation is not there. And it works for maybe only very simple apps. But then when you start requiring more complex behavior, then you won't have that component to drag and drop to that screen to then build the app. So that's my opinion.
For MVP apps, you could use no code to try test your idea. Okay.
Yeah, that's true, but and I think we all agree it's going to be a waste of time. And if it's because of drag and drop, both Android and iOS at least support drag and drop components. You just need to make the connections. Yeah, I would go for a no.
If there's somebody there from one of those companies, maybe not hire anybody here.
Or maybe this is a chance for you to change. Think about it.
Okay, there's one here that is. So anybody else wants to step in? No. There's one here directed to our iOS friend, and I think this is straight to your heart. Is Swift UI mature enough? And I think there's kind of a link, kind of a wink saying, "Is it?"
Is it? That's a very good question. So my answer is it depends. So if you're building something, so I imagine Swift UI like a drawing, right? Where if you draw within the lines, then you're good. It's bliss, right? So you are super productive. You build UI really fast with very complex behavior, animations, everything. So it lives up to its dream and to the vision and to what it's being sold to us. But then when you start drawing outside the lines, then it's where problems start happening and you start fighting it. And then you start questioning your life's decisions. And then you say, well, my life in UI Kit wasn't so bad after all. That's at least that's my experience. So it's good for it's getting more and more complex, and allowing more and more things to be done elegantly and nicely without fighting it. But sometimes you still need to fight it. And also another problem is that because it's very new and you have different versions, and different versions of iOS support different versions of SwiftUI, and so you have always a very delicate balance of what you can and cannot do. And then if you end up in a dead end and you go to Stack Overflow and you get 10 or 15 different answers, probably all of them wrong, and some of them for different versions, and one works and another one doesn't work. So it's still early, so it depends.
Can I talk to you about our good Lord Compose Multiplatform? Just that.
Okay,
I'm
so
sure it's much better.
so yeah, go ahead.
In SwiftUI, are there many differences between iOS versions?
Yes.
When change for 17 to 18 is
Some things you can use, some things you cannot use, like some modifiers or some APIs become, yeah, some APIs are, the APIs keep evolving, and so some things you can use in iOS 18, for instance, and you cannot use in iOS 17. So you have to start using conditional code. And let's say you have a bug, which is very often in SwiftUI, and a fix exists for iOS 18, but for iOS 17 you don't have a workaround, or you have to use a very complex or not so good solution. So you are fighting it a bit. For instance, SwiftUI 1, I think it was from iOS 13. It's completely broken, so it's not even. I wouldn't recommend you use it, even if it's possible, right?
Now you know the pain of Android developers back in the day.
One other thing that is interesting. So web and backend are now used to a life cycle where they do continuous deployment low. So every time that they do a very little change, they push to production. In Android and iOS, you have stores, and the code is not decoupled. You can just submit one single build. You cannot just submit just a single point, right? Unless you're using React, for example. So in React, you can do what they call like updates out of the store or something like that. Yeah. So what does it actually? So what can you actually update? Because that's kind of, when you tell that, is like the dream of every product manager. Like,
Yeah.
whoa, I can update, and Apple won't need to block me out, or Google, wherever. What can you actually do? What can actually get yourself banned from stores if you do it?
Yeah. So adding major new features is not recommended using that, of course. Fixing small UI bugs or fixing a bug. Imagine you messed up a if condition or whatever, and the fix is like really small. Or you messed up colors somewhere, or the spacing visually. You have the possibility to just push a new bundle of the JavaScript that the app will automatically download when user relaunches, and it will be fixed.
But so for the React Native unfamiliar people here, like technically, what can you actually do? So let's ignore what the stores
Anything,
allow you.
anything that doesn't doesn't involve you messing with native code, you can do, because it's the JavaScript bundle. So changing colors, changing the UI, changing some logic, you could add new features. It's not recommended because stores will eventually block you from doing that, right?
Okay, so
But
basically, if you have no native integrations like native
basically,
code, you
if
could
you
do everything.
exactly, if you don't need to add any new native code, you can do anything in the app because it's just more JavaScript.
Steve Jobs just smiled at his rave. So for the native guys here, how can you compete with that?
Is it really the dream? So currently you can do soft releases when you do a continuous deployment and you do it for 100% of your target. It means that it will affect 100% of your target. And currently in Android and iOS, you can do soft releases. So you can have a small subset of users trying and using your new features and your app, and you can find those bugs prior to sending to all of of your population. So of course it will be great, and there are some techniques to be able to fix these kind of things. So you might fetch strings or RGBs or something. Of course, it will be more boilerplate code that you need to implement, but yeah, I see the advantages, but I'm good with what we have now.
I just want to add that so one of the biggest problems in native was at least especially for Apple or for iOS was the review times from the App Store review, and those have been improving. And so we even have a surprising experience from my current project where the iOS review was faster than the Android one. So, but even then it was it was fast. So it's a problem that's getting smaller. So.
I was just going to say that I know that a couple of applications do this, which is, so imagine that you have part of your app that might need an update in the future. You can just have a web view or a WebKit view, or how is it called, on iOS to run your code. And I know that I think it was Airbnb did that. No, Instagram did that for the settings because they were trying to understand the best settings possible. So they just did that with over the air to try to find the best solution and to avoid keep sending new updates to the app, so you can have the best of both worlds.
Interesting. Any?
How secure is using this approach to update your app? Because anyone could send in new updates.
So there's a centralized server that you have, just like a web server for a website, basically, and your app is connected to that server. So you have the overhead of every time you open your app, there will be checks to see if there is a new bundle to be downloaded. So that's again a trade-off, I guess, to have that functionality. But that's basically it. You have a centralized server. You push the new bundle to that server, and there's a version associated with it, and then your app just connects with it. It knows, okay, there's a newer version, let me download it and start using it as the bundle instead of the bundle that I have.
But out of stores.
Exactly.
Okay.
Can I just say something really quick? I was remember something. I think I don't know if iOS has something similar, but Android has the concept of in-app updates where you can, if you want, you can block the application to be used until the user updates the app. It's not the same thing because it's invisible, but we can achieve something similar native.
And you
where the
can
user
also
allows
implement
it.
that in React Native. It's just a force update feature, basically.
Okay, so one question for this side is from here, the audience. One of the big challenges I see with KMP on native teams is the fear from iOS developers on losing the relevancy on the project. How to sell to iOS devs? So how were you were you sold into KMP?
That's a good question. So I was on a project that used KMP so for a while, and so I didn't I didn't feel that we lost relevancy because we still had plenty of stuff to do, and I think it's also depends on the scope of the KMP. So how high does it go? In our case, it was mostly for shared business logic in the model layer essentially. So network requests and the persistence and some state management around authentication, for instance. And so for us, we iOS developers, we simply didn't need to be concerned about those things, and we would just integrate with some client that interfaced with KMP. So we still had a lot of stuff to do, lots of business logic to do. So I didn't feel that. But for instance, it's possible to use KMP almost until the UI or even the UI itself. And in that scenario, I can understand where, okay, now I don't write Swift anymore and everything is KMP. Maybe Mota will correct me. But there I'll see that that can be a likely scenario, but I didn't feel that in our approach.
Would you be comfortable with a project going into the until the view model? which kind of forces the architecture, right?
Yeah, it forces a bit the architecture and not in the current state of KMP. So I think KMP it's good, but it doesn't allow the full expressivity of Swift. For instance, it's still very limited in the APIs it makes available. The integration with Xcode is also not perfect, even though Xcode is not perfect in itself, far from it. So there's still lots of work to be done there and to make our lives easier. But I still think it's a viable option.
Well, for me, I think the main question is, are we Android developers, iOS developers, Flutter developers, or are we Kotlin developer, Swift developer, Dart developer, JavaScript developer, .NET developer? So if we use a language that gives us a lot of advantage, removing the need of implementing twice the same thing, and we really enjoy developing, no matter the language that you need to use, you will enjoy it. So you won't get, of course, if you have a team working on the KMP part, you won't enjoy it. You're just a front-end developer now. But if you work on the full stack, I don't see why you can't do it. Even with other solutions, what we really enjoy doing is building apps. So no matter the language that you use, and it's always good to learn new things, you'll be happy if you are able to participate in the full development of the app. And that's my vision. So if Kotlin or other language, or maybe Swift in the future, is the language that we will use and will allow us to have less error-prone code, less boilerplate code, and accomplish the same things in a better app, a better performant app, I will be happy to do it.
First, wise words. Thank you. I was going to say I love you. Yeah, I think this is a really good question, and I understand saying that there's a thin layer that I think it's not that thin between if you're moving towards Swift space and iOS developers will be a bit keen on having that on their side. And I understand that reasoning, and I have to have a bit of a different opinion here because we all agree that still native has the best performance. So having something that will go to that space will perhaps not reduce the performance, but increase the bottleneck or the troubleshooting that you need to do. And for that, I think developers need to agree at which point they go with their SDK, with their framework code. Talking about Kotlin Multiplatform, I think we reached the point where we can share the view models, but I also understand your point, because if you want to try to use the publishers on iOS and you try to use Kotlin Multiplatform, that's not straightforward, and you need, sometimes it's not even possible. You need to make a couple of workarounds for that. And that's not the goal of Kotlin Multiplatform. The goal is to help developers to produce apps better, faster, and leave native developers, for instance, to develop what they enjoy, which is mainly the UI, making those beautiful animations, those. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
It's debatable.
Yeah, it's debatable.
Always a text.
Yeah, but
Some
it's
people like building the back end of the app.
yeah, but that in that sense you go more for, I would say, go more for Kotlin multi-platform, or there is a thin layer on Swift. No, you think it's
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. So at least from you, it depends on the app.
of
But
course
you can
as
have
always.
very complex business logic that's has nothing. It's very far from the UI. So let's say you have to sync data. You have to parse. I don't know the file stuff from the file system, photos and videos, and I don't know, just throwing ideas, or having some processing like video processing,
Yeah,
complex algorithms.
you go native. Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's far from just buttons and UI and lists, which is pretty much what most of our current apps are made of, right? And it's the UI. And obviously in the UI you can go very deep and do like all these fancy animations and transitions and everything, and people love that. But there's a lot of things that
Yeah.
people also.
And also for your career. So you go for a job interview, you're working at a company where you just do views or you just do UI,
Yeah.
and then you go to a company and they ask you, "Oh, okay, so tell me a little bit about the life cycle of your app," and you say, well, "I don't know, I don't need to, just do
But
like
in that case, you need the life cycle. But yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, I understand your point. But that might happen. For instance, imagine that you use Kotlin Multiplatform for the database, so you might never end up using Core Data or whom. And I understand that pain from iOS developers that if they go to a company that used Kotlin Multiplatform, they might receive a question from Core Data, and they're going to say, "Oh yeah, I know how to use it, but from the documentation, and I've never really worked with it because I have a layer of abstraction that I don't know what's underneath it." And in that sense, I understand the point of view, but in my opinion, also the advantage is that having a common shared library across all the platforms are bigger than having something native and, of course, faster.
Um, with thinking of time, and we're getting to closer to the end, we have, so there's an elephant in the question room, and I surely want to address that. If Swift UI is so immature, how come many companies out there, including the ones hosting this event, require candidates to have work experience with that? Eat that, iOS dev.
Oh no. The companies require it.
In terms, I assume that it's in terms of
Like
exercise.
the interview process.
Yes. The experience they ask, or it's better to have experience on that. I think
Okay.
that's the question.
So first, I didn't say Swift UI was immature. Well, it's immature, right? It's immature, but
we all are immature.
we are immature. So it's immature, but depending on what you need to do. Okay, so this is the first thing I want to.
You need to speak there because the guy is looking.
I don't
at
know who you are. Yeah. He'll find me. So it's I would say it's a bit immature, or at least it doesn't allow you to do as much stuff as UIKit does, and sometimes it forces you to fight it a bit. It has adds some friction, but that doesn't mean it's not here to stay. And so since it's here to stay and you can do a lot of things with it, it's a technology that's getting more and more prevalent and relevant to the ecosystem, and it's normal that companies start requiring it and even expecting that you are fluent in it. So it doesn't shock me, but at least from my experience, be prepared to hit some roadblocks and even fall back to UIKit on some scenarios, or just gain some gray hairs and lose some years of your life fighting it. But yeah, I think I don't know if I
Thinking you got it right. I guess one question, and let's start on that side for change. A question for all of you, and depending on the time that we spend, it might be the last one. What excites you the most for the future in the platform that you're defending here? So, is it what's the next big feature? What's kind of drives you in? If you want to speak and sell it to one of us, says, okay, in 2025, Maui will.
Okay. In 25, my will be the reality because Xamarin is dead. Okay. And the principle for Maui is the performance and let the community know that Maui arrived yet. Okay. Finally arrived. So, and I think the 2025 will be the time for Maui grow in the community, not only that .NET developer, but in the other community too. I think it's the big challenge for Maui. Okay, because Maui has the knowledge from Xamarin, and many things are strong and robust, and I think the community need growth.
So for React Native, I guess we are having finally one of our biggest issues, which is debugging, uh, being solved
Do you
by
have
a
bugs in React Native? What do you
no,
mean?
no, no, we don't. Of course not. Why would we? But yeah, debugging was always a pain, even when it meant as soon as we reach the native layer, when stuff happens in native layer that it shouldn't, it's a pain, of course, for React Native developers to debug. And we have a really nice company, um, Software Mention, which has a project called Expo that's actively working in the community, and it's evolving in a really really fast pace. They are working on a really nice debugger that integrates directly with the. Firstly, I believe it's VS Code for now. It's like an extension. Um, but yeah, it looks really promising, and we already have a lot of things in the environment. So in the community is really really strong. We have a lot of good quality libraries to interact with the native layer, also provided by Expo. So I believe even right now React Native supports officially, so it promotes people to use Expo for their new projects. I believe that's the future for React Native.
Can I just say
Yeah,
something? One of the interesting things that I've seen with React Native is when I've got to a team where most of the people were web developers and they jumped into React Native, and I asked like, what architecture are you using? And they said like, what do you mean by architecture? And
I
I was
know.
like,
That's
what?
that's one problem as well in terms of code structure.
um,
They are not much opinionated to the code architecture that you follow,
I think
and
it's
I
the
don't see that changing any soon.
yeah, I think it was the first time that someone kind of after the year 2000 said, "What do you mean by architecture?"
I know. That's a tricky one. But yeah, so the ecosystem itself is not really opinionated on whatever architecture people use. They are free to use whatever they want. That came, I guess, a bit more from React than React Native itself. um, so since React Native developers are expected mainly first to be React developers, they would bring whatever architecture is mostly used in React. Since there's no set in stone architecture to be used in React, people just go YOLO and they do they do whatever they feel like doing.
That's JavaScript in a nutshell.
Exactly. I think that's also one of the downsides of some downsides from the ecosystem that comes with JavaScript, I guess.
Um, just before you answer
Yeah.
that, just a little tease. So, is the big thing that you're highly looking for the giant fork that Flutter was just happened, like the get flocked .dev that they said, yeah, this is amazing, we're forking this. Why? Because forking is life. So is that the big thing?
No, it is not. But a few words on that. So, in case some people aren't aware, a few weeks ago, a bunch of people announced that they were forking the Flutter repo on GitHub and maintaining their own version, which is called Flork or Flock.
Is flock
Flock. Um, One of the key people from that project is Matthew Carroll, who was on the original Flutter team. He's always had a bit of a beef with the Flutter team, so to say, on a lot of issues. Some of which are valid criticisms, others not so much.
How are you managing? So is it expected to be compatible, the two of them?
Yes, they, at least on their mission statement, they aim to always be updating themselves as Flutter also updates it. I've
Get the
actually
popcorns.
yeah, I've actually had I had a bit of time today to look at their fork and see what they have done, and they have pushed a few things, a couple of bug fixes that the Flutter team still hasn't gotten time to fix. But as with every open source software that's out there, let's see how long it actually lives, because maintaining open source stuff is
And now I thought you'd say what's better than Flutter? It's having two Flutters.
Well, I mean, diversity is always good, and if Flock can actually provide some interesting bug fixes or features that the community has requested from the Flutter team, and the Flutter team hasn't provided to them yet, then maybe for some cases it will be an option. But I would recommend that for now you should stay on the official repo. And to go to your next question, the next big thing that I'm at least hyped for is 3D libraries for Flutter. So the Flutter team is working on a couple of libraries that will allow you to load up a scene, have 3D objects rolling around, manipulate them. So that's going to be very exciting.
Cool.
Next challenge will be find Flock developers.
Exactly.
Don't tell me it's those glasses. So please don't.
So what's the thing for
What gets you more hyped next, or it will be soon on iOS, or you expect it to be soon? That's why I was asking. Like, do not tell me that it's those
okay.
augmented reality glasses.
Yeah, Vision OS.
Do not say that name.
No.
It's like forget about that.
Yeah, so
If you're hearing this, Mota will not be here the next time. Okay.
so I think that's at least for me. So I think Swift 6 was a bit has some issues in terms of not being very easy to adopt because of all the concurrency warnings and enforcing that. So my hope is that it gets a bit smoother for people to adopt it. I don't know in terms of the whole ecosystem what Apple is cooking. So I don't know. Cook. Yeah, so that's my hope for
What is happening here?
Well, hopefully it won't happen an Android fork. So for sure, that's a good thing. I was trying to think about new features related with the platform itself. Other than AI integration, I don't see anything that is because it's a mature technology. We don't have like a big bug fixing or something, and we are able to do debugging as well since the beginning. But I will say one of the yeah, exactly, integration with AI mostly on the development tools. I think is, and not only for Android. I believe that for all the both native and multi-platform tools is the big thing for 2025 and the years to come.
What I'm exciting about next, dinner, and some really cool things that I was listening to each one of you speaking, and you're all expecting that your companies will fix things that are terribly broken. Sorry, it's true. A cool thing about Kotlin Multiplatform is that if something is broken, no. No, I wasn't going to say.
Already fixed it.
Yeah. No.
It's only beta because
Yeah. No. The thing that happens is if something is broken on Kotlin Multiplatform, you can just use native. Basically, it's no, it's true. No, but the cool thing here is once again, we don't aim to have a project 100% Kotlin Multiplatform. We aim to have a solution that works, and if that means having code written natively, be it. That's no problem for us. Anyway, the thing that I would say that I'm most exciting, especially for my iOS friends, would be the possibility to have a full framework in Swift instead of Objective C. I believe that would be next, and that is something that we can, of course, improve. And there are, of course, a lot of things that we can improve, but this one is the major one that will make our OS. Yeah, compose for iOS stable, but I'm assuming that's already again for on May and the Swift not. But anyway, Compose and Kotlin Multiplatform is the future. Stay on.
If it works. If not, just go native. And that's fine.
If it doesn't work, you can still use native.
Okay, and I think we're a wrap on this. Thanks everybody for joining. This video will be, so the live stream will be on Mindera's YouTube channel, so you can review it later if you didn't catch some of the interesting parts here. So we aren't putting the part where they fought when we stopped the video, but we'll sell it afterwards. Yeah. Thanks. Yes, definitely. So thanks all. So representing GDG, Carlos, thanks for coming. So if you are interested in anything related with Google, you have groups called GDG. So Porto, Coimbra, Lisbon, a bunch of them. So go and Google it. And or message Carlos on social media. We have Sword. Thanks for joining us. It was a pleasure. We have a dear friend of mine from Mindera, Pacheco. Thanks for joining. It was always a pleasure. From Flutter Portugal, thanks for joining us. From MobiWeb, ReactNative, getting all the web people that pretend that they're mobile developers. That's let's go with it. And our unicorn, it took me I don't know how many days looking on LinkedIn, but I found it. Thanks a lot, our Maui champion, for joining us. Thanks everybody at home. We'll see you in a few months on another event. Thank you. Bye bye.